Alright, well, I'm Gordon Lee, and I'm a composer and a pianist. I live in Portland, Oregon. Let's see, I was born in Queens, New York, and lived in New York City for my first year, though I don't remember that. I grew up in a suburb of New York City called Briarcliff Manor. And I first came out to Portland back in 1977 after I got done with my school, my undergraduate degree at Indiana University. And had a great time, met some incredible musicians. A lot of people from Portland remember that time in the late 70s and early 80s, sort of a golden age for music here in Oregon. Even though it was a small scene, relatively speaking, but still there was just a lot of great musicians and a lot of places to play and just a real hunger for music. I moved back to New York and I lived in New York City. I lived in Brooklyn from 1980 to 85. And after 5 years in New York, where I was working as a pianist in New York, but I just realized that I had enjoyed my life a lot more in Oregon. So I moved back to Portland in 1985, and I've been living here ever since. I'm active as a performer and composer. I also am an educator, so I teach at Reed College and Western Oregon University.
Okay. One of the things I'd like to talk with you about is that golden age of jazz. Because I moved here in 1977.
Same here.
And,
yeah.
I remember hearing you back then, and some of the other players.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, it's so innovative. You know, it wasn't outside or in. It just was good.
Right.
Good.
Right.
You know, just like you said, a hunger. You know,
Right.
I'd forgotten that. So
Right. Well, it seemed like there were lots of people, my age or older. I mean, I met Jim Pepper back at that time, and I ended up playing with Pepper a lot. Probably hundreds of times, really all over the world. I also met Sonny King. Again, a guy from an older generation but he had hung out with Pharoah Sanders and some of the, free beginning of the avant-garde movement in California. I played in a band called Free Bop, led by Rich Holly, the saxophone player. And our whole mission was to play some free, as the name implies, some free music along with bebop. And we really tried to mix those two together. And we actually were able to draw a crowd occasionally, which was great. I think that a band that's deliberately mixing free music and bebop now might have a difficult time, although it depends, of course, on how it's marketed, for sure, as to how successful they're going to be. But that time in Oregon and Portland was just fantastic. There was, I was playing lots of gigs, 4 or 5 nights a week. I was working, and sometimes jazz would be at the hippest club. There was a club called Chuck's Steakhouse. There was a regular hangout for the Trailblazers basketball team, and I don't know if that still goes on now. Occasionally I'll see somebody, a famous local person in a jazz club, but it seemed like it was much more part of the, if you were hip, you went to jazz clubs back in the late 70s, and the jazz was not, in some ways, sometimes now you can go to a jazz club and it's very conservative, performance. There might be there's a singer, or there's horns, and they're playing just standards, and they're playing them in a very standard conservative style. I know how to do that. At the same time, I don't think that's the most exciting music that's happening nowadays. So there would just be a little more emphasis on new combinations and new sounds and new mixtures of styles. It was very obvious and strong in the late 70s here in Oregon, and actually, it's kind of interesting because I've thought about this quite a bit. When I moved to New York, it was 1980, and that was the year, of course, that Ronald Reagan got elected. And so the whole country took this conservative direction. It was going one way, and then suddenly veered sharply to the right. And actually, that happened in music too. That's the whole idea of playing standards and playing repertoire became sort of the direction of jazz. And I don't argue that it is important to know one's roots and where the music came from, but I think there almost became too much of an obsession of, oh, you got to just play you got to know all the standards, and you have to be able to play them authentically, correctly in the style in which they were originally recorded. And there was just a little too much preoccupation with that, and so that's why jazz ends up where it is right now, which is, you know, sort of under the radar, certainly not the country's most popular music. So that's what happens, you know, when you decide, oh, we're just going to study the music of the past and try to play the music of the past in the style that it was originally created in. So I was always fortunate to work. I mean, I've worked with some musicians who wanted to do that, but I've always worked with musicians too that wanted to do something kind of new and kind of different. And so I've been very grateful for that opportunity to do that, because that's what I do best. I'm not great at recreating other styles as much as I am actually going into territory where nobody's ever really quite done what I'm doing or what the band is doing. Those are the situations I like to be in, where there's no role model really. Or I could say, you know, Beethoven's my role model, you know, or I could say Monk is my role model, but the music doesn't sound like Monk and it doesn't sound like Beethoven. But you know, those are the people that I really admire, and just two of many, in terms of, yeah, they really found their own voice and their own direction in music. Let's see. Having said that, I should take this opportunity to say I am very proud of, and so are most of the jazz educators in the Portland area, of Esperanza Spalding, because she is a direct product of our education. She just played a concert here in Portland, and of course she's hugely popular now, and she's a very talented, smart, directed woman who is doing something that's really kind of new and different, and it's getting some national attention. She's been on television a lot lately, on Jimmy Kimmel and Jay Leno and David Letterman and Jon Stewart. So she's getting some attention, and I first met her when she was 15, and she was a student at the jazz camp, the Mel Brown Summer Jazz Workshop at Western Oregon University. Mel Brown and I run this camp and have now this is going to be our 13th year. And in about about the third year or so of its existence, Esperanza was a student there. And so I first met her when she was a teenager, and she was very focused and directed, even for a 15-year-old. And so everyone took notice of this young woman who seemed like she knew exactly what she wanted to do. So what can I say? It's sort of a vindication of yes, we are doing the right thing to produce somebody like that, who's I think she's a remarkable talent. I think her music sounds great, and she's using things, and she acknowledges Portland as being the environment that she came out of, and that's great. That's very all of us teachers are very honored by that. And she's not the only one who went to the jazz camp. There's some others. Haley Nieswanger is another one. She's she went to school at Berkeley, like Esperanza, and then she started touring with either orchestra. And I'm not sure where Haley is now. Maybe she's done. I think she might be done with Berkeley now, but maybe she's teaching at Berkeley. I think that's possible. Javier Nero, the trombone player, is another. So there's a few of these people that are really getting some national and international attention that were students of ours, and so we feel good about that.
Perfect. This goes up to, those little segments of some people from Portland.
Sure, yeah. He was one of the he was like the kind of the free trumpet player back there in the early 70s on the scene.
It was John Jensen.
Yeah, and I played with him many times. He sometimes free bop would expand. I guess the camera's rolling.
Yeah.
So sometimes free bop would expand and include other musicians, and John Jensen was the trumpet player who was frequently involved in that. But there were other extremely creative people. Dave Storrs on drums. Crazy drummer, but great ideas. Very, very inventive and creative.
His own record label, is that?
Yes. What was it called? Well, the record I made we made a record for Rich Holly called Multnomah Rhythm Ensemble. I think it was called Multnomah Rhythms was the name of the recording. And that's the only recording that Free Bop ever made. Or I shouldn't say Free Bop. It was sort of the core of Free Bop, and then we added other people, like John Jensen's on that. And Obo Adi plays, plays talking drum and other percussion on that recording. So, but that's what was great about that environment, where it was so open. It's like, oh yeah, let's bring an African drummer into this, and and then let's have a rhythm and blues singer, Greg Smith, sang on that record, and so all this stuff was being mixed into what certainly there are moments on that recording that are absolutely free jazz, free improvisational jazz, and then other moments where we're playing chord changes in a form and then playing in time and all that stuff. So yeah, there was sort of a openness, a desire to mix the different styles together. And that was great. You don't quite see that now. It's more like, okay, you either play this kind of music or this kind or this kind. There might be a generational difference. I am again happy going to hear a younger generation of musicians, many of whom I know either through teaching them or coaching them in some way, and hearing what they do. I heard Ben Darwish, a keyboard player, has a dance band called Commotion, and the song that the audience went nuts for, they're playing a dance, over at the Goodfoot, this club close to where I live, and the biggest tune that they was. It's called it's Moanin' by Charles Mingus, but they changed the beat. They put sort of a hip hop beat onto it. Other than that, they played the Mingus chart, and the audience is screaming and dancing, and it's like, wow, this is cool. So sometimes it's just a little change that needs to be made, and you reach a whole different audience. And and everybody. I mean, there were solos and all that stuff, but yeah, the audience. It was a dance gig. There were dozens of people dancing on the dance floor. It was great.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's cool.
We've ended up with a lot of imitators.
Yeah, sure.
Due to whatever reason, I don't know.
Yes, right.
We could dissect all day long.
Right.
But it seems like there's some great. They can play the licks.
Sure.
But you're thirsty for what you just said because you want something different.
Right, and I think that actually there's a long tradition of that. I mean, that's actually what the residue or whatever of the classical tradition, where you play, if you're giving a classical piano recital, you play a piece by Bach and you play a piece by Mozart and you play a piece by Beethoven and Chopin, and there are the set standards that these are. If you can play these pieces by these composers, it means that you can really play, and so you sort of establish your credibility. I mean, and I understand that why it might be necessary at some point for a person to do that, but it is unfortunate if that's where they stay and that's all they want to do. And the reason why sometimes I go to classical piano concerts. I don't know. For a jazz musician, I go pretty often. A few times a year. But still, I get tired of seeing always Schumann and Liszt, on every concert, and that's all I'm going to hear. It's like there's a lot of other great music out there. But I think, and I'm talking about a different audience now and different people. But I mean, people, unfortunately, in our world, most people want to hear music that they've heard before or something like what they've heard before. And I'm sort of ballparking here. I'm using big generalities, with the exception of some young people who they are interested in hearing what's happening right now. But I have to say, for people in their late 50s like me, most of them are not out there seeking new sounds that they haven't heard before. They want to hear something similar to what they've already heard. So that's, I don't know, you could say, I don't know, is that cultural or is that genetic? I don't know. Where does that come from? But I mean, that's certainly where we're at right now. And it's too bad.
Going out less as we get older.
Yeah, well, that's it's certainly a part of it. Yeah, really, exactly.
Sooner, less stamina.
I know, man. I go to bed at 11 o'clock on a Friday night if I don't have a gig now. I never did that. I didn't start work until 11 o'clock in New York.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In Richland, you have to be off the road by 5 or 6 in the evening because the bars close then.
Wow.
So, and that's their only chance to drink after working hard all day.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's a town of 165.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of activity anyway.
Wow.
But after 6, you get the sense they're in bed.
Yeah,
6
right.
to 7, they're getting ready for bed, you know, and
Yeah,
they're
right.
out by 7 every night.
Oh God, yeah, well.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Self-promo?
Let's see. Let me move this. Okay. Let me grab this box here. Some things that distract me. Okay. We're ready here.
Okay, rolling?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for many, many years I've been involved as a composer of music that is not necessarily fitting in the jazz category. In other words, I've written some completely composed music. I'm currently working on the 3rd viola sonata for Steve Price. He's a violist. He's played with the Oregon Symphony for many years. And that piece will be premiered next October. But more importantly, the piece will also be played on a night that I have of entirely original music of mine at the March Music Moderne series in March of 2013. So I'm not, have to stay tuned for exactly which night it is. We're still working on that.
That's in Portland?
It's in Portland, yeah. It's a month-long series that features lots of modern music of the 20th and 21st century. But I have, it's sort of an honor because I have my own night where it's all my music. So that 3rd viola sonata will be on that. I've written a piece for 4 cellos. We're working it out. There may be improvisation on that. I'm also working on a what I have to call a piano concerto, but it's for improvisers. So which would be me. I'm still wrangling with how big the orchestra is going to be because I can't really afford a 40-piece orchestra. But this is what I'm planning to do. So it'll be a full concert of original music that I've composed. There'll be some that's entirely composed, like the viola sonata, for viola and piano. There's a wonderful pianist playing on that. And then there's also this other music that features improvisation in combination with written music, which is what jazz has always been from the very beginning. So I just want to say that these are projects that I'm involved with. I've always felt it's the highest path to try to combine improvised quote jazz music with composed music. That it's been going on for a long time. It goes all the way back to George Gershwin or earlier. Okay, that's right. This tradition goes back to Gershwin or earlier.
I'll have to call you right back. I'm doing the interview here. Okay. Right. That turned off. Okay, well, we'll just add it there. So
yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this tradition goes back to George Gershwin or earlier of featuring improvisation in combination with composed music. So certainly jazz sounds are in the music that I've composed. At the same time, I like to work with something beyond just an ABA form in some of the compositions that I'm using that involve improvisation. So I just wanted to mention that this is my project for the next year, is to get this work on these several pieces that are using combinations of composed and written music. And is it jazz? Well, it surely doesn't sound like George Gershwin. Or Glenn Miller, or even Duke Ellington for that matter. But at the same time, it's not just composed classical music as well. So I'm trying to sort of carry on that tradition of combining the two.
Nice. As you were speaking, I thought something that Tom Swoboda said, that he liked to compose. One of the reasons that he was inspired to compose was that you could capture the high from improvising. Right? Like you're just going and you're just really high on what you're doing.
Yeah, right.
And you can
Yeah.
You can capture that so that somebody 100 years from now, in a different country, in a different time, can take that paper out.
Yes, right.
And get that high.
Sure, right.
You know,
yes.
It's not exactly the same, but it's a whiff of it. You know?
Yeah, well, certainly you can. You know, that's the wonderful thing about say, and most and I studied with Tom Swoboda, so I know Tom very well. That all the great classical composers, or in my opinion, all the great ones, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Debussy, Stravinsky, I mean, on and on, they all improvised a lot. That was very important to them. And improvisation would frequently be part of their performances and their concerts. And what's so really magical about that is certainly if you're working on a Beethoven sonata where he's following a very strict form sometimes, but nevertheless, I feel, and from reading about what he said, he got his ideas from improvising, and you feel like you are right inside the mind of somebody who died 200 years ago. And that's incredible. That's almost supernatural, actually. So how can you know someone who's been dead so long, and yet you...
I suppose that...
right.
may have had something to do with it. Okay, so we were talking about...
Well, so I'm in the classroom at Portland State, and it's a few minutes before the class begins, and so I had it was a piano transcription of Wagner's Prelude to Tristan and Isolde, which I think is one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written, even though, as I said, I detest Wagner as a human being. You know, he's thoroughly repulsive. He was a racist, and I really cannot stand racism in any way. So it's a dilemma. But I mean, let's face it, there are many, many artists that weren't great people, but they were great artists. They were brilliant at communicating in their medium. And anyway, so I'm there and I'm playing on the piano. And actually was part of even, like, I believe sort of a theory assignment from another class to analyze this piece, how the appoggiaturas and past escape tones and all this stuff, how it all works. So I was playing through the piece. And Swoboda heard me, and so he says, "Oh, here." I said, "Well, what is this here? What is he doing here with this chord? How do what do you call this?" And so he said, "Well, here, let me play it." So he sat down and he started playing. He didn't even play through the whole thing, but I don't know, it's many measures, 30, 40 measures of the piece, and at one point he sort of gets to a point and just stops, and I could feel that both he and I, coming from very different places. I mean, he's Czech, I'm American, he's, 15, 20 years older than me, but so we have different perspectives, but we both were really moved by the music. At the same time, he and I are very well aware of who Wagner was, and he just sort of stops and looks down and sighs, and he goes, and then looks at me sideways, and he goes, Wagner was a very egotistical man. I mean, it was this, kind of priceless little lesson there that at least, you can't allow yourself to be, even though the music is beautiful, you can't allow yourself to be seduced by that into thinking he was some kind of great guy. And Swoboda was just kind of reminding me of that. It was a very powerful, moving moment that happened right there before class, right? With Thomas. So, I mean, that was just one moment in particular that was strong.